Charles, do you smell something? Might be Joe Biden.
I don't go around. I don't go around sniffing inappropriately young women.
It's
But
a good move, I think. But the president doesn't seem to share your approach.
well, especially you saw the recent. He was at some event. I don't know exactly where it was, and some little girl was in, I think, her father's arms, and she was having none of getting sniffed by the president, and she kicked him away basically, and good for her,
Yeah.
frankly.
I think it was publicly
Yeah.
announced as a karate chop, and I am
Right.
all for little infant girls karate chopping creepy old jerks.
Well, it's not as if the thing that I don't understand with all this. I mean, the party that is in theory supporting women, protecting women, against rapists includes Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Anthony Weiner, and now Joe Biden, who credibly still stands accused of grossly inappropriate, perhaps illegal behavior involving Tara Reid. The whole Tara
Right.
Reid episode has been swept under the rug, as it were. And, you know, she is, by the way, a self styled progressive with Democratic Party credentials. She had a book that was due to come out before the election. And I think, like the Hunter Biden laptop, the mandarins in control of We the People decided, let's, we believe all the women who accuse Republicans, but none of
Right.
them who accuse Democrats.
Yeah.
And in Biden, in Joe Biden, we have to really look at this at 35,000 feet above sea level. This is a person who has lied his way through life. This is a person who in 1988 had to abandon his campaign because he basically admitted that on core elements of his resume, he'd been lying about his performance in college. He lied about his performance in law school. He lied about he plagiarized Neil Kinnock, a Labor Party. I guess he was either leader or prime minister speech. And you rightly put this thing up. He's lying again about the kitchen fire. I mean, this man does not know how to tell the truth. And you can imagine
Burning toast is not your entire house burning down.
Well, if you imagine if Donald Trump used the Cheryl Atkinson thing, just swap out Biden for Trump. Imagine if Trump had said that I know why roads are important because they'll get you to a place faster. Why one of my mansions burned down with Melania in it, and somebody would say, "Excuse me, Mr. President." I mean, what? Isn't that Melania over there? Oh, I just meant a portion of my kitchen. When I said my house, I'm in a kitchen fire. Trump would never get away with this.
No.
And so just briefly, we always jump over the stunning accomplishments of the art department, but really this movie, Scent of a Woman, if people look up the plot, it is actually pretty much on point to what we're dealing with here with Biden. We have Brit Hume, who is the longtime, I guess, senior correspondent emeritus at Fox News. I think before Fox, he worked elsewhere. But he said on the Monday program, the Bret Baier 6 o'clock hour, he said that Joe Biden is obviously suffering from either dementia or Alzheimer's, and he's not his usual self. His mental health is impaired. I mean, this is not a trivial. Well, I mean, this is not a trivial situation we're in. It's not as if everything's hunky dory, and the rest of the world is just quiet, and China's not trying to take over Taiwan, and Ethiopia isn't blowing up, and Yemen isn't a mess with tensions between Saudi Arabia that's bombing the crap out of the Houthis, and Iran is not trying to up to mischief anywhere. We don't have an open southern border. We don't have raging inflation. We don't have a crushing debt burden. We don't have suspiciously high stock prices around the world. And this idiot, Lunch Pail Joe, has decided to leave 2 days before Thanksgiving to go up to Nantucket, of all places, and spend Thanksgiving in a mansion worth $30 million and I've never been to Nantucket, but my understanding is that it's not particularly diverse. I
Right.
mean, they may have a few people up there whose net worth is less than 10 million, but I mean, it's not exactly um, a place that's representative of this great country of ours. So he's up there with fellow plutocrats. Um, and at this time of year, I've only once been on a beach vacation where I thought it was warm and it was actually quite cold, and that was in Tunisia, Thanksgiving once. And it's miserable being on the beach in a place like Nantucket when it's cold, because if you're walking along the beach and there's wind, the particles of sand get picked up and thrown in your face. The winds can be howling. And another consideration is, I don't like the Bush family either, but George W. went out of his way while he was president not to do this type of thing, because what this means is that there are a significant number of security personnel who have to be away from their families on Thanksgiving,
Ah.
so that they can be in this Nantucket to look after, the old fart and his collection of strange family members.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they want to make sure. I don't know what's going on here, Charles. Everything was working perfectly, and now the sound is falling apart, and I can't get it.
I can hear you. Sure. So here he is, all teed up to go out on Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving is, of the various holidays that I think are special around the world, Thanksgiving is truly a special holiday. It's an interesting story, if true, that the original Thanksgiving, that there were natives who somehow spoke English after 1620. So how did they learn English? In particular, there was one who had been abducted by an earlier raid. I don't know if it was the Roanoke raid or if it was when exactly, but by people who passed through modern Massachusetts before 1620, had taken this person over to England, and as an oddity, introduced that person to the king and the queen, whatever it was back then. And that person had learned English, and then that person had either escaped or gone back and was watching the settlers as they tried in a socialist experiment that failed to make the original settlement work. And so it wasn't working. It was getting cold. And I don't know if this is a Joe Biden fable or a true story, but took pity on the settlers and brought them food, and they had a joint celebration, which has become Thanksgiving. And to put that in perspective, if that's a true tale, it's heartwarming. If it's just an invented tale, it's also heartwarming, but it's not true. So there was a tweet on my Twitter feed, which is, it's actually kind of interesting watching my Twitter feed these days. Somebody apologizing for a fundraising appeal that bragged. I don't think this was a joke. There was some fundraising appeal had been bragging about the average donation for some charity was $14.92, and this was a tweet apologizing for not appreciating the significance of that amount in the days leading up to the wrongful celebration of the annihilation of indigenous peoples here in this country. It's just
well, there's a lot of people apologizing for strange things, and then there was some other social media person who was like laughing or saying that it was revenge for Kyle Rittenhouse, that this maniac in Waukesha, Wisconsin, ran over a bunch of little kids at a Christmas parade after he ran over his baby mama. I think there's a giant dent in the front of his car from where he crashed into the mother of his child. And then I guess he just figured if he's going to be on trial for murder, he might as well make a day out of it.
Yeah, and the number of stories, frankly, on Free Republic is a great site. Rantingly is a good site. But the number of stories out there concerning violent attacks. There's one about a woman getting into an altercation with a guy in a wheelchair, and that woman coming back with three men.
Oh, I saw that.
Beating the crap out of the man. There's a story about somebody who shouldn't have been asleep on the subway at 1 o'clock in the morning. getting a knife in his neck and that person being killed.
Oh,
There are quite a lot of stories of the rising tide of violence. There's another story about somebody being surrounded by dirt bikes in Boston. And really, the second you let word out to the criminal element that it's okay to that you're not going to be punished, you're not going to be excuse me, that you're not going to be
they catch on.
punished, or if at worst, even if you're say arrested momentarily, that you're not going to be jailed, and maybe even if you're convicted, that you'll be let out of jail. The second that happens, you encourage people already living on the knife edge of life to get ever more violent, and that's not something that you want to do. It's kind of like the mistake, in quotes, that George H.W. Bush made with his envoy to Iraq that triggered the invasion of Kuwait.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, April Glaspie let it be known in a meeting, one way or the other, supposedly, to Saddam Hussein that if he invaded Kuwait, we wouldn't do anything about it. And so Saddam was like, okay.
What?
Really? Yeah, you can look it up. April, Glaspie.
Wow, I've never heard about this woman before.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to remember.
But that's socially engineering Saddam Hussein to get him to. I mean, this is like the equivalent of making a video, why isn't Saddam Hussein invading Kuwait? This is exactly what they do.
Well, remember that Saddam Hussein was a pretty close ally in the battle against Iran. Mm-hmm. So we very actively supported Saddam with weapons, training, money, in an effort to poke more than the eye of the mullahs in Iran.
But weren't they also, Charles, simultaneously supporting Iran clandestinely with shipments of guns and things from Iran-Contra?
That's also true, yeah. And that's actually bears on our whole Clinton Foundation stuff. So that's a good segue, actually. I want to, I've got a large number of books near me, and I don't know if you can see this one.
Masters of the Game.
Yeah, I'll read the title. It says, Electing Presidents, Dominating Courtrooms, Controlling Media, or Winning a World Series, Williams and Connolly Lawyers are Masters of the Game. Now, this is a book that was published, let's see here exactly when it was published. I think it was published around 2009 or thereabouts, or 2010. And it's a really interesting book because, as you were saying in a previous podcast, prior to Watergate, the Washington Post was not as important a newspaper as it has become in theory. The New York Times was very much the paper of record. I think that's a different book here. To me, like
a game I'd probably rather be playing.
It looks like an S&M book or something, but it's Eisler is the title author. It's the third one there down. You see it? Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
So back prior to Watergate, the paper that people cared most about was the New York Times, and then with Watergate, the Washington Post grew tremendously in prominence. And similarly, in the 80s, Williams and Connolly, there were some powerful lawyers. There was a guy called Edward Bennett Williams, who's very famous and passed away. But it was nowhere near as powerful a firm as it became through the Reagan-Bush presidency, and it mushroomed into prominence under Bill Clinton. And this book is the kind of book, when I was at Dillon Read, we hired, or I didn't, but the bosses hired, I think, some famous business historian to write a book about the history of Dillon Read. And it was basically somewhat objective, the Dillon Read book. It didn't dwell on controversies particularly. And similarly, this Williams and Connolly book is somewhat objective. It was very much written with the cooperation of the senior folks at Williams and Connolly, who include Bob Barnett and David Kendall and a number of other very prominent people. And so, but interestingly, though, um, as you know, and our viewers know, I don't believe in coincidences. I don't believe that you should just ignore coincidences. And when you see um, people defending Reagan Bush people and Iran Contra ending up on the same team defending Bill Clinton in the
Right.
Paula Jones and other, there's something odd about that, something very odd about it. And what we discover in this book, and I'm not going to read chapters or paragraphs from the book right now, but we discover admissions really against the deep state interest. So Bob Barnett, who we've talked about before, and there's a New York Times Magazine cover story about him in the Obama years, has engineered for himself a very, very powerful gig. And that gig is, if you're a celebrity and you want to do a book, or you're a celebrity, you want a media contract of some sort, you use Bob Barnett. And if it's a book, instead of using an agent who charges you 15%, Bob Barnett will just charge you a very high hourly rate. And you have to pay that rate before you know that you're going to get a book deal. So that's the negative of that approach. But the positive is, the positive is that if you're Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and Laura Bush and George W. Bush and folks like that, you know you're going to get books published. So you'd much rather pay Barnett, say $500,000, and get a $10 million book advance, as
Wow.
Bill Clinton did, than to have to pay $1.5 million. And so that on the one hand, he's really very cleverly, this Barnett guy, put himself in the middle. And as we can go on to his Williams and Connolly description on the website. His specialty is taking people from government and repotting them, one of his specialties, into a post-political career, right? And if you are these big media companies or these big entities that want to be on the right side of dynastic political families, that's not a hard trade, right? You know who the president is, you know who his team is, and you know what these people can do for you. And if they love unregulated globalism, then any firm that benefits from unregulated globalism is quite happy to throw a bone, and maybe a big bone, to Bill Clinton via Bob Barnett. And you look at his clients. His clients are, what does it say there? The 3M.
Well, let's also remind people that this is the same law firm where, David Kendall has his checkered legal past. Bob represents major corporations in litigation matters, corporate work, contracts, crisis management, transactions, government relations, and media relations. He's dealing with JM Family Enterprises, USAA, which is military insurance, Walmart, Toyota, Deutsche Bank, which had some problems with Jeffrey Epstein, Discovery Communications,
General Electric.
Oh,
and then you look further down. Bob is one of the premier authors representatives in the world. I mean, look at the people he's represented: Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Bush family, Bob Woodward, Dick Cheney.
Well, first of all, the only person in this list who's an author is James Patterson. All the rest of them are politicians who James Patterson writes books for.
Well, I think George Will is an author.
Oh, okay. Well,
and Jack Welch is there, you notice. Jake Tapper is there.
Jake Tapper, I believe, is a professional idiot.
Yeah, he's not even that good at it. And then you see the other thing he does is he represents the television news correspondents and producers who want their contracts. And you see here, It doesn't say this, and it should. Rita Braver is his wife.
Who's that?
She's, I think, CBS News person. But Brit Hume, you see, is one of his clients. Neil Cavuto is a client. Brett, does it say Brett Baer in there somewhere?
Well, we got Brian Williams, Leslie Stahl, Sanjay Gupta, Steve Ducey, Brit Hume, Rita Braver, his wife, Chris Jansing, Neil Cavuto. Oh, wait a minute. Neil Cavuto.
He's Fox
Cynthia
Business.
McFadden, Peter Alexander, Pierre Thomas, Jim Acosta.
Yeah. And Wayne Williams and Jesse Waters.
Right.
So basically, these are sort of slammed. Brian Williams too. You see that first, I mean,
Yeah,
these
this
are,
was the first guy who I saw. If you're a
yeah.
liar, he's your lawyer.
But that's a sweet gig, right? If all these people are sort of self-selected people, these are people who are going to, whether the book is dull as dishwater as Barack Obama's book is, or Bill Clinton My Lies or not, they're going to arrange to sell the book. I mean, they're going to pump
Yeah.
it out to political supporters. They're going to have, well, I'm not
Book
saying they're doing
signing
this
things.
illegally. Yeah, they're going to have public sector unions buy a bunch of copies and give them away as stocking stuffers, that kind of stuff. So it's a foregone conclusion that most of these assignments will work out well. And this guy's at the center of this trade, where he could his Rolodex is probably without peer. He's coining money. He has been coining money for a long time. But this merely supports my thesis, and I think your thesis, that the debate that passes for news is really an Obamaic set of false choices. Let's have a fake battle between right and left. Let's
Right.
get you focused on whether the right's winning or the left's winning, and let's not have you understand that the right and the left are part and parcel of the same beast that is in the business of asserting that there are these gigantic problems, whether they're fighting communism or fighting poverty or whatever, that we can then borrow a lot of money by actually borrowing on the debt markets and also running up deficits. And we'll just say that this money is being used either to fight the war on terror or fight communism or for whatever noble purpose in theory. And nobody will check too carefully to see how much of that money sticks to our pockets and ends up financing our lifestyles. And that's a process that has been very damaging to this country. I mean, prior to Ronald Reagan's departure, presidents really didn't walk away with these gigantic prizes. But
Right.
and I like Ronald Reagan, but when Reagan departed, and he wasn't super wealthy, but he was wealthy. A bunch of his kitchen cabinet friends who were very wealthy said, the former president, shouldn't be living in a shack somewhere or a small house. Let's buy him a house in Brentwood and give it to him, or where Bel Air, I think it was. So they did that, and also in '89, Japan was right close to the peak. I think December 30th, 1989 is the recent historical peak of the stock market. And so Reagan, unwisely, in my view, foolishly, accepted a gigantic speech payment to give a series of speeches in Japan. Back then, it was in the millions of dollars. So with those moves, suddenly the folks in Washington, D.C., like Barnett, had this land office business they could do where you're not paying a bribe to Barack Obama exactly, but you arrange for him and Michelle to get a $65 million deal, either on the way out the door or after they leave. Book deals, Netflix deals, speech deals, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think that's worse than unseemly.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
I think it's a direct criminal pipeline to just send money to people, because now it's expanded beyond presidents. We've got every dope in the FBI, like Peter Strzok writing books, getting money, Andrew McCabe getting on CNN. I mean, these guys should be in jail.
right. And we go back to base principles. So in the case of Richard Nixon, when he left in disgrace, when he left the White House, there was a serious and protracted battle over the information that he took with him out of the White House. Was it his personal property, or were they official government records? And out of that, in 1978, ultimately legislation was passed defining what presidential records are very specifically and what they are not. And that we've shown that in the past, the definitions, that's the Presidential Records Act of 1978. And it very specifically defines much of the information that Bill used to write his books, and Hillary, you may have used to write her books, George W. Used for his book. Much of that information as being property of we the people of the United States of America. The basic principle of that act, as I understand reading the legislative history, is that we, the people, have an absolute right to see unclassified presidential records as soon as they are available, and classified presidential records within 12 years of the departure date of each president from the White House. 12 years being more than enough time, 3 presidential election cycles, to make whatever may have been so important 12 years ago not as important. And my opening premise on the Clinton Foundation, and for that matter, we know that 33 million emails are missing out of the George W. Bush presidency minimum. My opening position is nobody knows how many presidential records have been created or received since 1978, because there hasn't been an effective auditing process to go in and make sure that the very lowly National Archivist, who's, it's an important position, but the National Archivist doesn't have an army, he doesn't have an investigative service, he doesn't have the ability to face down the President of the United States and say, sir, you can't have your goons going through your papers and taking out anything that might be incriminating, and only putting in your papers stuff that makes you look good. No presidential archivist has that power. And interestingly, in another book that I have here, this fellow just died, actually, David Alsobrook. This is a very interesting book, and it recounts his tenure as leader of the George H.W. Bush Library. He previously had been leader inside the National Archives. He had been at the Carter Library, and then he went to the H.W. Bush Library, and he got crosswise with the Bush people and the National Archivist. And then the Clinton people very skillfully roped him into the position as the first person in charge from the National Archives side of the Clinton Library. Now, this is a man who he's actually, he's not with us anymore, so he's still dead, but he's left behind a lot of records. And by reading his book and the footnotes, we see that he's a very careful man who provides crucial evidence in the book that destroys the legitimacy of the Clinton Foundation. Absolutely destroys it. He recounts in great detail how, Bill's various interactions. He recounts some of the important details concerning the Clinton presidential, the Clinton, in quotes, school of ripping the public off, of public service, and how that came together. And he indicates in the book and in footnotes to the book that there's a lot of source material that folks can go, if they were in the FBI trying to do a serious investigation, that folks could go and use to show that Bill Clinton was involved planning his post-presidency before he took office in the White House. Literally, he held meetings in Washington, D.C. that are recounted in Taylor Branch's book, which is another important book.
You like mini golf and strippers? We got that.
Yeah. And so, that what you're just showing there, if you go back to it, Jason, that's the Choctaw Station. That's the Sturgis Hall, I believe.
When you mentioned the School of Public Service, I remember when I was walking around the grounds there, I saw it, and this is it.
Yeah. Well, so that's an interesting story because this couple, we've talked about them before, the Sturgises, Sturgis, they had died I think 20 odd years before this project, and they left behind a foundation, the Ray and something, I forget the woman's name, Sturgis Foundation, that I believe is being mismanaged by its executors. And that entity decided to make a grant, $3.75 million grant, specifically for the renovation of this Choctaw Station, which should have paid for all of that.
Now, but wait a minute. Who are those Sturgises, Charles? Because we have this guy, Frank Sturgis.
No.
There was I wonder if he's related, though. There was remarkably little discussion about the JFK assassination. And this guy, well, he's definitely arrested as one of the burglars in Watergate, which we were just talking about. And I believe he was involved in the Bay of Pigs. Yeah.
But
David
this
Morales,
guy
right.
Yeah, but I don't think this Roy Sturgis had anything. They may be related, but I doubt it. I mean, you could look up if you Google Roy Sturgis, because Sturgis was not this Roy Sturgis was certainly not born last name Fiorini, right? This is a different one.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, this is if we stay on the Sturgises I'm talking about. This is your classic American couple. Is that it? Yeah.
That Walter Roy Sturgis died in 1976.
Yeah, so this is 21 years before the Clinton Foundation was even formed, and he's a philanthropic. Roy and Christine, exactly. This is him, he rather, and they put together this foundation to support causes in, I think, Arkansas and in Texas, and well after his death, the people who control this foundation decided that they wanted to support this Clinton School of Public Service. Now, in another book, and I promise you this is the last one I'll bring up today. This is a very interesting book by the former special agent in charge of the Little Rock FBI office, talking about what he encountered through his career, but specifically in the time frame 94, 5, 6, 7, and 8, when he talks about a lot of corruption. Now, one of the things he talks about in this book is the way in which state legislators in Arkansas would get in bed with the University of Arkansas system, and they would assert the need to create some kind of institute or charity or whatever. They get state funding for it, and nobody would check to see where all the money went. And in Arkansas, you have the statewide system. You have various, as Rush Limbaugh likes to talk about them, campuses. You have a campus in an important one is in Fayetteville, and the Little Rock campus was very small until the Clinton Foundation got involved, with its various goings on in Little Rock. And so this guy talks about how this I.C. Smith, who's actually a great writer, he's a G-man, but whether he wrote it himself or he has a great editor or co-writer or whatever, it's a fun read. And it has a lot of very interesting information, which is germane to our ongoing investigation of the Clinton Foundation. But basically, it matters when Bill Clinton actually may have gotten involved planning the so-called Clinton School of Public Service. In the first instance, an educational institution, a degree-granting educational institution, is a different form of charity, specific, narrow form of charity than the 170B1A6 form, which the Clinton Foundation was supposed to be. So if it were going to be a degree-granting thing, which it is a degree-granting thing, they should have been talking about that in the application for tax exemption, which was dated December 23rd, 1997. In that application, Skip Rutherford and the two Williams and Connolly lawyers, and actually I guess three Williams and Connolly lawyers at that point, they get to this idea of what are they going to be doing, if anything, with an educational operation. And they say, December 23rd, 1997, we may do something with the University of Arkansas. We haven't decided it. But when you go into the Butler Center in Little Rock, you could find a detailed memo that explains that beginning early in 1997, and elsewhere Bill talks about it, David Pryor talks about it. Bill instructed Diane Blair, Jim Blair's wife, now deceased, to design, and an eminent political scientist in Arkansas, to construct a detailed curriculum or whatever, beginning in 1997, early in 1997. So the plans were well advanced. In the Butler Center, you can see a summary of the plan where they talk about everything that they did. A lot of that work was done before the Clinton Foundation was even incorporated. So the sloppiness here, you can be, if you want to be sloppy Steve Bannon in your personal life, as Trump refers to him, you can be sloppy. That's fine in your personal life if that's the way you want to live. But in theory, if you're running a public charity which stands in the shoes of government, and if you're doing that as somebody who, quote, has devoted his life to public service, and who was a Rhodes Scholar, an attorney general, governor many years, president 8 years. You don't have the excuse that you don't understand legal machinery, you don't understand why the administration of justice must be balanced and fair. You don't understand, you can't get away with saying that I'm not setting an example for other grifters who will look at this double wide on the banks of the Arkansas River there and say, geez, if Bubba can get away with claiming that this thing is a public charity while going from being, by his own admission, dead broke January 20th, 2001, to having, one mansion in Washington, D.C. and two homes joined together in Chappaqua as another mansion, and who knows how many foreign holdings, and now a fake charity, frankly, that's never reported properly anywhere in the world, that sits today on an endowment approaching $300 million, where it has no legal authority to operate in the way that it has with this endowment, which in theory is generating income that then can be deployed, according to the Clintons, to do whatever the Clintons want to do with the money. That is absolutely not a charity, a legitimate charity. I found
some detailed images of the roof garden here, Charles. It's kind of interesting. We haven't looked at this, but this was something that our friend Stuart Dean brought up as one of the kind of totally inappropriate aspects, because this is like very nicely designed thing, but this is not accessible to the public, right? This is just for Bill Clinton's private use.
Apparently, but beyond that, it's also, it figures in that this is classic Clinton. So when you do a donation, and you to the National Archives, back when they did it, November 18th, 2004, there was the statutes were written back then in a way that required you to think through how big the entity was. And I think they made a mistake in calculating the endowment. They did it on the basis of square footage. And if it were me, I would do it on the basis of cubic footage, because a number of these rooms are very big, and therefore in the summer challenging to cool, and in the winter challenging to heat. And so, but anyway, there's a cutoff at, I think, 70,000 square feet. Above 70,000 square feet of building, there's 1% amount, below 70,000, there's 1% amount, a low percentage that you have to cough up for an endowment to defray over the life of the project and maintenance. But if it's above 70,000, there's a much higher percentage. And with this move that did not occur until well after the donation on November 18th, 2004, they dramatically increased the size of the building. And also they changed the appeal of the penthouse, which, goes on to this roof garden. So there's like a 5,000 square foot penthouse that is meant to be not exclusively used by the Clinton family. But in practice, that's the way they do it. And Bill then gets to cavort, according to one author. I don't want to move the screen. The name will come to me. He wrote the book Unlikable. But he recounted the tale of how there are pool parties in the summer on this roof garden with, topless women running around and who knows what.
That sounds quite likable. Oh, but he's talking about the problem with Hillary Clinton.
Right.
I like pool parties.
Ed Klein, yeah.
Oh, right, Ed Klein. Now, did we talk to him at some point or something?
No, I don't
think so. This guy's come up before.
Yeah, he's a famous guy. Nice, very flattering picture of Hillary.
Well, it's likable.
I'm kidding, of course. So yeah, we're on the subject of the Clinton Foundation. We haven't been talking about that for some time, but I had been annoying folks on Twitter with like, where's the 990 and where's the audit? It's just now been linked up on their website. We could have a little fun talking about it. I know you found it. And I know there's some of our viewers who are particularly interested in what I may think about their various filings. So if we go through for a second, if we go into the audit.
This is it, right?
That's the cover letter. It says, what does it say there? Dear something or other, dear
reader.
Dear reader. It used to say, dear
marking 20 years. Since the Clinton Foundation first opens its doors in Harlem.
You see, none of that first, you can't even get the first sentence right, okay? So, the Clinton Foundation, no such entity called the Clinton Foundation, registered in New York State, a state represented by Hillary Clinton, beginning in 2001 as one of two senators. They just said, look, your laws about registering inside the state before you solicit, fuck them. I'm the former president. I'm going to do what I want up here in Harlem, and Hillary's the senator, and nobody's going to do anything about it because everybody running the machinery in New York is a Democrat. There was no such entity called the Clinton Foundation in 2001. It did begin conducting operations illegally in Harlem in August of 2001, according to multiple accounts, but it didn't bother to register to do business in New York until July 29th, 2009.
Maybe they know Hawk Newsom.
What?
Maybe they know Hawk Newsom.
Exactly. They were sort of the predecessor. They were the example for Hawk Newsom. So, furthermore, the Clinton Foundation, the real name of it was the T uppercase William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, was incorporated on October 23rd, 1997, but it wasn't organized, I would argue, ever. But it operated under the cover of the Clinton presidency with an IRS head that had been appointed and was a close friend of Hillary's, close ally of Hillary's, with the Justice Department that did the bidding of the Clinton family, and then 8 years history of the Clintons putting people in the SEC, the IRS, any place that might, Justice Department, any place that might become a problem for them after they left. They had their people stuck in there, political people who were inserted into roles that are supposed to be apolitical, but where these people were partisan political hacks. So this first sentence is incorrect. And in my book, when the first sentence, which I think is the most important sentence in almost any publication, is that wrong? I'm not going to waste a lot of time reading the rest of it. But I would like to draw attention to a few things. If we get through this letter,
just real quick, Charles, because you caused me to realize something. The law school at NYU is like super dominated by Andrew Weissman and all these Clinton dopes. They're sort of like, I've done this at parties when you stand by the kitchen so the hors d'oeuvres come out and you're just getting all of them. That's right. What they're doing. They're waiting at the law school.
Right. Exactly. And so if we just go through, so dear reader, I think if you go to the third page, is the cover page, you can see on the left there, is the first page of the, in quotes, audit. And then the next page is the balance sheet, or the letter, actually, the index.
This is yet another bad.
The Cohn-Resnick has perhaps some decent accountants in it, but it grew out of the housing debacle in the late 1990s, early 2000s, doing mortgage-backed security issuance, and I wouldn't say this work product is much better than the work product of BKD, and I don't think
that's what I was going to ask you about, Charles. Is this significant that it's not BKD? Did maybe Eric Hansen see too many Sunday with Charles episodes and decide it's time to get a tiger costume and run away?
No, BKD was out of here a long time ago. The Cohn-Resnick has been in there since I think either 16 or 17. But if we go down to the next page, this is the index is the next page, and the page after that is the letter, and the page after that is the balance sheet. All right, so this is your boilerplate letter. Here's the balance sheet. Now, you can do this. I'm not an accountant, and I'm not an expert on minutia of accounting. But if you want to do work that is helpful to somebody like me, what you do is you should produce for the most recent year end, which is December 31, 2020, and you should also put the preceding year so you can get a sense quickly as what may have changed year to year. Now, if you look in here, the biggest item by far of the assets, if you just freeze the frame for a second, is investments. And those investments are held in an endowment, the legal paperwork for which is not, in my view, cricket. So when you go through the legal paperwork from the beginning to the end, in the very beginning, they incorporated this entity. They don't say it this way, but they incorporated the entity to comply with the Presidential Libraries Act, and they specifically referred to giving themselves the right to raise money for their authorized purposes and to create the initial endowment required to send money over to the National Archives and Records Administration when the grant was made. There is no the way they are using this now is they raised all this money, really starting after Hillary left the State Department, is when the endowment ballooned from something like 250,000 up to the present level. The bulk of that money was raised, say 13, 14, 15, 16. And what they do is they take the income off that, in theory, and they just do with it what they want. And that is, this is not an entity like the Gates Foundation, where you can give, if it's the money that, if it's a private foundation like the Gates Foundation, you can assert a very wide-ranging number of purposes that you want to follow. But this is a public charity, in theory, the Clinton Foundation. It's not supposed to be controlled by a family. It's not supposed to have bylaws which concentrate power not only at board meetings in the Clintons, but in between board meetings. The way the bylaws are drafted, the Class A directors, which are Bill and Chelsea, and could be some other person if they want to put that person in, between board meetings, which is for the bulk of the year. I mean, they typically don't have that many board meetings. The Class A directors are allowed to make decisions concerning this foundation that are not subject to the review of anybody. And that, I would argue, forgetting whether it's a public charity or not, that is so far away from the governance required for a charity that obviously no serious objective law firm has looked at this thinking that if they just cater to the Clintons, that they'd be tagged. You know, whoever's been looking at this has been told, look, you know, there's this maniac Ortel and Goodman and other people, Peter Schweitzer, yelling and screaming about this, but they could yell and scream until the cows come home. Our people are in at Justice, our people are in at the IRS, our people are in around the world in key jurisdictions, and we're just going to show how powerful we are by continuing to break the law, operating this thing, flouting the law, and the world will understand that we're really powerful. That's why you need to give us money, because we can break you if you want to do it. We can make you if you want to do it. And look what we're doing here at the Clinton Foundation. We get away with this crap.
Dumb question, Charles. It seems like a huge amount. I mean, is this an investment firm? Is that normal for a charity to have a $200 million investment portfolio?
Not particularly. I mean, it not for a public charity.
Right.
And
it's a huge sum.
Yeah, and if we go to the next page, you'll see the next one, I think, is the income statement or a statement of activities. Okay, so we look here, statement of activities for 2020. They show total revenue and support of how much, Jason? It's 52 million?
Well, it says without donor restrictions. Oh, total. Yeah, 52,035,665.
Right. So what's of that 52 million? How much of it is from investment return?
Where is it?
It's a number. It's right above
I see it. Well,
what's the number?
Net investment return, 33 million, Charles. Excellent.
So 33 out of 52 is from investment return, meaning that 19 or thereabouts is revenue in the door. So then you look at the expenses, which are below. How much are they? Further down the page, 31,
650 grand.
No, 31 million. 41 million.
Oh yeah. Wow. That's a lot. And losses.
Right. So the way I would look at that is I'd say take the 33 million, if you freeze the frame for a second. If you take 33 million out of the revenue, you have only 19 million of current revenues, and you're spending 41 million on expenses as losses, meaning you're just driving this thing into the ground. And your expenses are higher, I would argue, than they should be. I mean, that's like $2.5 million a month. You know, Why are they doing
How many people
this?
work for this, Charles?
About half.
Huh?
About half of them.
How many? Right. If I just say,
That's
how many employees?
we'll be able to show that you answer that question specifically in a second. I don't know off the top of my head. That's a famous line to those of us who know Dillon Reed, that C. Douglas Dillon was asked at a charity event involving the Met, which he was Metropolitan Museum, he was chair of it. How many people work at Dillon Reed? And he said about half.
Yeah. Well, here is an interesting thing. It says 2,000 employees in 2015. Seems like a little bit of a rounded number, perhaps made up like so many other numbers.
Well, that 2000 number that included CHI back then, Clinton Health Access Initiative, and CHI was spun out in 17. So we don't have to guess, Jason. I'll show you the number in a second. We can go back to that. So we keep going down the page to the first. We'll get the statement of cash flows is next. We can fly by that one, and then we get to the footnotes. Now, first paragraph. What does it say there about
the nature of operations? The Bill Hillary and Chelsea Clinton Foundation continues President Clinton's legacy of putting people first, unless he wants to rape you.
But putting people first, specifically Bill Hillary and Chelsea Clinton. I mean, there is that is not a charitable purpose. We just stop there for a second. Putting people first. That is just the kind of garbage you see on mainstream television ads for, people helping people. It's a tagline for General Motors. I mean, it's nonsense. It's just gibberish, right? Mm. And it doesn't square with the legal documentation for the Clinton Foundation. I mean, it's a nice idea. If you wanted to be a 501c4, that is to say that you could solicit money, but donors wouldn't get a tax deduction. And I don't know what the rules are about foreign entities contributing to C4s. I don't know if that's allowed or not allowed, but I think it's not allowed. If you wanted to take that approach and say this is going to be a partisan operation, that Bill Clinton had a vision of how to steal money from the public and pretend he was doing good works and get away with it and chase women and whatever else he wants to chase around the world, giving boring speeches and interesting places, flying private, etc. You could probably try to do that as a 501c4, and the cost to the taxpayer would be far less than doing it within a public charity. In a public charity, which the Clinton Foundation is supposed to be, I don't know the current tax laws, because nobody knows the current tax laws because we don't have, the reconciliation bill done yet. But it used to be that if you were Bill Gates and you wanted to give money to a private foundation, you could take a tax deduction on just 30% of your income could be in the form of gifts, where you get a current tax deduction for the gift. If you gave more than 30% away, you'd have to carry that gift either forward or backwards. I think forward, and you give the gift in the current year, but you don't get the ability to write it off against your taxes until your income, if it continues, permits. In a public charity, you can write off 50%, not 30%. So by running this not as a C4, but as a public charity, this has been a way for a lot of very rich people to get around the law limiting the tax. It's very costly. And it's also been a way, frankly, and you'll see that most of the people who work, in quotes, within the Clinton Foundation are on the Clinton team. Many of them are, have been involved with campaigns or actually working for Bill Clinton in government. And so this is a way, this foundation has been a way to just continue to finance what otherwise would be a very expensive project to pay your hangers-on out of your personal pocket. Because if
something pretty interesting here, Charles, relevant to what you were just saying about the 501c4s. This is from the Nonprofit Law blog, and apparently in 2018, Steve Mnuchin headed up a plan that resulted in the Treasury eliminating donor information disclosures in 501c4s and C6s. Seems like a terrible idea. Why would he do that?
Well, he's one of the top money raisers. He's extremely wealthy.
Peter
His
Navarro does
father,
not like him.
his father was one of the most legendary traders in America, not like Bill Clinton, spelled Traders.
Hmm.
Steve Mnuchin's father and a few other people single-handedly averted a meltdown in the 1987 crash, and they've made a lot of money along the way. So no doubt, I mean, this is beneficial to those who want to get involved raising money for political campaigns, but probably not too helpful to the American taxpayer.
Right.
So if we could just go back into that document.
His father looks like a Star Wars character. Have you seen this
So,
guy?
yeah.
I hate to distract, but we've got to just look at this guy. He's a strange looking character.
Yeah.
Anyway, there we go.
Right. So remember we said that the revenues for this thing were 50 odd million, and the profit, in theory, the difference is like 10 million. So let's go down to the 990, which is probably 15 pages into this. Further down, begin to see it. And let's compare. And I have not done a detailed analysis of this yet, other than to say it's more bullshit from the Clintons.
Right.
All right. Here's the thing.
This is 8879. What's that?
That's a form, I think. What does it say? Signature authorization. Keep going down to the next page.
There it is.
All right. Here's the first page of the 990. Remember, I said that total revenues on the audit, which should be accurate, are 50. Now look down here further this page. You see the line. Maybe make it a little bigger if you can. So you'll see there's total revenues. It's line 11, I think, or 12.
Total revenue is 12, 40.
Here they're saying it's 28.
28. How did it change?
Well, they didn't include unrealized gains. That's where you have Bitcoin, let's say, and the value has gone up during the year, but you didn't sell it. So the difference, the change of value, is what's called an unrealized gain. That should be included here, and it's not. And so you go further down, you see total costs, or what do they say? It's very small.
It says total expenses. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah.
39 million, and then it's negative 10 million.
So here they're saying the difference between revenues and expenses is negative 10, and in the audit they say it's positive 12 or whatever. So that's a pretty big difference, and you're supposed to square these. You're supposed to explain the differences, and of course they didn't do any of that. So they're up to their usual tricks, thinking maybe they correctly are thinking. Who knows how crooked New York State and the IRS has become? But they're thinking they're going to continue to get away with this. And I hope that is not the case.
Charles, what do you feel is different now? I mean, particularly with Joe Biden and Merrick Garland, doesn't it seem less likely than ever that anything's going to happen to the Clintons?
I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, we still have the Larry Doyle, John Moynihan case moving along, and that's a sealed matter. It's now more than 2 years old. Voluminous evidence. We know from Doyle himself that he gave materials to the Durham team and also sat down with the Durham team. So, maybe there's a plot afoot. I think we could change gears a little bit and get into this. There's been a lot of reporting that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and their staffs are basically have unreconcilable differences at this point, that they're just not getting along. And so there's some talk about, on the one hand, you get stories that in CNN, a long story that may have been sourced by Ron Klain, the chief of staff to Biden, saying that, Harris is not up to the job and not likable, a bad manager. And then you have a story appearing in the New York Times, bringing back up the cobalt deal in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it sure seems as if, on the one hand, people close to Biden are trying to punish Harris, and the people close to Harris are trying to put the heat up on Biden. And then Hillary opens her pie hole last several days talking about, we have to do something about the very real threats to our democracy posed by AI. She's on Rachel Maddow and any other platform that will take her. Plus, she's got a book out, a ridiculous book out. And so it seems like she's surfacing. And then there's a big piece in Politico today talking about the most consequential Secretary of Transportation ever, Peter, what's his name?
Pete Buttigieg. Wait,
Pete.
Charles, before we move off of this, if you went on the news and said there's a plot to stage a coup in this country, they'd say, or if I did, they'd say you're a conspiracy theorist.
Well, she's the one who pioneered in recent history that I think it was Jennifer Flowers, but maybe it was also Monica Lewinsky. She was the one who said, to Matt Lauer, there's been a vast right-wing conspiracy against me and my husband ever since he sought office. And that, sadly, I think these people, Hillary and others, are very adept at at social manipulation, at social engineering, and getting you, when you hear somebody is a conspiracy theorist, that causes you to think twice and say, well, maybe this person is a conspiracy theorist. The only conspiracy theorist I know about who's successfully waged multiple conspiracies is Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton.
Right.
I mean, you think about, I've been tweeting against her, not that she cares too much about it, but you think about the idea that it's obvious from the Durham work so far that Mark Elias and Perkins Coie and likely Barack Obama and his team and Joe Biden were desperately afraid after they watched the phenomenon that became President Trump. They were desperately afraid of what might happen to them. And Hillary was quoted at some point as saying, if he wins, we're all going to be hanging. So they did their level best. Hillary Clinton, got the debate questions in advance, had all kinds of false stories planted against Trump, weaponized the FBI and Department of Justice against the Trump family, weaponized New York State machinery against the Trumps, likely weaponized other governments around the world against the Trump family, had the mainstream media just in the palm of her hand. And for all this rigging, Hillary Clinton couldn't win a rigged election. I mean, it's amazing to.
Anything more happening with Danchenko or any of these people who have been indicted?
I haven't seen anything recently on it. I mean, I'm guessing if something does come out today or Friday, it's probably going to be quite damaging to the Clintons, and they want to bury it. Equally,
right. Well, aren't they kind of on ice for Thanksgiving, like holding off on doing any major stuff?
I don't know. I mean, I personally, in my prior life in business, launched a number of different, for clients, hostile takeovers on either the Wednesday before or Friday after Thanksgiving. It can be a time where everyone wants to be away from the office. So if you want to launch an attack, sometimes it's a good thing to do. I think that Durham is just doing left foot, right foot work. But if we go back to what I was spinning there, we have questions over Harris, questions over Clinton, questions over Biden, and questions over the future of the Democratic Party. So unlike 2020 and 2019, when if you wanted to challenge Trump, you were challenging a sitting president, a rich sitting president, and a rich sitting president who's adept at using the media and playing to the American people. Would you want to do that as Michelle Obama? And I think the answer is definitely not, because you wouldn't want to lose for many reasons. And it's also going to be kind of grueling to do that. Now, with the Democratic Party in disarray, with a number of years, 5-6 years almost, since Barack Obama and Michelle left the White House, so there's some reminiscing about the good old days in the Democratic Party. Would you acquiesce to a draft movement to go in as vice president and then ultimately as president? And I could see. I mean, I have no interest in politics, but I could see somebody like Michelle with her kids out of home, look at this and in the end be persuaded, this would be great. I don't have to run. I'll be president, because we'll get Joe out of Joe. Who knows? Joe may, you know, suck down a wishbone on Thursday and not return from Nantucket for all we know.
I
And I
can't
don't
believe he
wish that on him.
survived the colonoscopy, Charles.
Yeah, that's where they're hiding all the Hillary Clinton missing emails, I think he said. But
Right.
uh and they were stinky before they went in there. But anyway, you could imagine that the people around Michelle, saying this is for the good of America. We need you in there. It's 2 years, 3 years really. And should you decide to run again, if you can't get the ship of state back on course in this abbreviated term, you're going to win in 2024. On top of which, there's a chance that with this move, Trump himself might look ahead and say, you know what, I'm not getting younger. I'm certainly on the back nine. I've got all this wealth. I lost a lot of money as president. I want to enjoy my family. Let's let Ron DeSantis or somebody else like that try to take on Michelle. You could see the whole calculus shift by this move. And, the people who already love the Obamas and run mainstream media would just be falling all over themselves to say, oh, yes, Michelle's inspired choice. What a sacrifice. So it could be that they're readying something like that. I mean, I find it odd for the Times to savage Hunter Biden the way they did. I find it odd for CNN to savage Kamala Harris the way they did. And we could be, scant days or weeks or months away from a dramatic alteration of the political landscape.
Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty shocking. One
And
bit
sorry,
of good news is yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
And to finish the thought about is anything going to happen, I believe that the Clintons and the Obamas, or I should say, I know that the Clintons and the Obamas don't like each other. And I think the Clintons have been holding a lot of things over the Obamas for some time. With this move, slanting Michelle into that role, if that does happen, and also if at the same moment Obama team decides, you know what, we're all in for Durham going after Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, teach them a lesson. Then you really you suddenly the Obamas would be deciding the future of this country for the next 20 years.
Well, they've already decided it. They want to reconstitute the Weather Underground with a new name, Black Lives Matter. Discussed last week with Lee Stranahan how Eric Mann, active member of the Weather Underground back in the day, trained Patrisse Cullors in Marxist and anarchist revolution tactics. And I mean, it's basically quite clear that this is a Barack Obama, affiliated revolution. We've got David Gilbert, just released from jail, Chesa Boudin's father. You know what I wanted to point out, Charles? You and I discussed this. I don't want to derail what we're talking about, but there was an interesting occurrence, I think, last week. We've had the first Black U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York appointed. It's a guy named Damian Williams. And certainly on its face, this is a good thing. I do agree that we need diversity in the world of justice, particularly when we have qualified people who can do that. The problem with this guy, however, is that he is also a recipient, or he's like a grantee of the Soros, the Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship for New Americans. It looks like they paid for this guy to go to Yale Law School.
Again, I think we should celebrate talent. Right. And I'm sorry, I honestly, if I had a serious health problem, I wouldn't be saying, I really want to make sure that I have, a diverse surgeon Yeah, I
Right.
want to get the best surgeon out there or the best practitioner. I don't care about their race. I don't care if they have 2 legs, 3 legs, and a tail. I just, I want somebody with real talent,
Outcome.
and celebrating the outcome here. I think you're going down the wrong track. I mean, I think we should be encouraging people to chase their dreams using their talent, using and nurturing their talents.
Just to
And so
clarify,
maybe
I'm not celebrating it. I'm just
I
saying
know
if
you're
there have
not.
been zero black U.S. attorneys in 232 years, there's
That's not
got to
true.
be.
That's not
That's
true.
what it said
In New York, that's not
in New
true.
York.
Yeah, yeah. But across the country, there have been other black attorneys. I mean, U.S. attorneys. So this is interesting. I'm not saying it's negative, but I like to have a U.S. attorney in New York make sure that federal laws are applied against the Clinton Foundation, which is a rogue charity actually being directed from the homes of the Clintons in New York and Washington, D.C., in gross violation of the law. That would make me excited. And again, I don't care whether the lawyer is white or black, male or female, or some other sex. I just doesn't bother me. I'm uninterested
Yeah.
in that, and
No, no.
not because I happen to be white.
Only reason I brought it up was that it happened recently, and you and I spoke about it offline, so you have a little more insight into why I was
Sure.
looking at this at all. Uh, this is an interesting little thing. He right away started a civil rights unit, and I think we know the direction this is going. We get a George Soros U.S. attorney. We've seen what the George Soros district attorneys can do. I mean, he's politicized the Department of Justice in a way that is extremely disconcerting. One thing that's very interesting is that this guy's first deal at what was the guy's name? He's presided over an indictment over someone named Willie Dennis, and the only reason I'm bringing this up, Charles, is because it is so strange. They went to the Dominican Republic to extradite this guy and bring him back to the United States, where he's in jail right now for cyber stalking. And of course, people know I do not think cyber stalking is okay, but I do think it's weird that they would go all the way to the Dominican Republic to arrest this guy. And it's not like murder or anything like that. I'm curious to know more about this case. It seems like maybe this guy, Willie Dennis, or what is his name? Yeah, Willie Dennis. I don't know. Maybe he was doing something else.
Well, and if you're going to talk about the Dominican Republic, remember that the Clinton Foundation has been operating illegally in the Dominican Republic since 2005 or thereabouts, and we still don't understand what the hell they're doing down there. Remember, Dominican Republic and Haiti are on the same island. Dominican Republic, I think, is the eastern portion of the island, Haiti, the western. But it's the same landmass, and the Dominican Republic is not rich, but it's in far better shape than Haiti. And some believe that that the border between Dominican Republic and Haiti is a porous border used to traffic all sorts of contraband in both directions. So, what was the Clinton Foundation doing in the Dominican Republic beginning in 2005? What were they doing, in theory, quote, fighting AIDS down there? Same
Well,
question
and
for
did
Haiti.
Willie Dennis know anything about it? Because what his story, it doesn't line up with what these guys are saying. So I'm curious to know what this guy was doing and why they have made such an aggressive effort to put him in jail when there are people like sort of smoking crack and grifting tons of money and they don't do anything about them. It's interesting.
Right. Well, yeah, the city. I mean, that's part of, I think, a wider dialogue. I mean, the city that is just literally being torn apart. Now, what is this? Hillary Clinton's Russian helpers? Is that?
Well, this, when you were talking about Durham before, I'm always looking for articles to throw up there while you're talking, and sometimes it results in interesting things showing up. This is just an op-ed here in the Wall Street Journal saying that Durham uncovers evidence of Moscow's attempts to influence the Steele dossier.
Yeah. So this is I think, is this an old article? 2 weeks
This
old or
is from
something?
November 11th.
Yeah. So almost 2 weeks old. So basically, we need to talk for a second about this area of communications advice. So in the field in the legal profession, it used to be that you had fiercely competitive law firms, one fundamentally not much different than the next, all composed of people with great resumes and long years representing clients around the world in the same sort of stuff. And so there was a narrow band of how much a lawyer could get away with charging. Similarly, in investment banking, it's a regulated area, investment banking, and a lot of scrutiny goes into how much people pay for services. And there's always one banker with mouths to feed is always willing to cut rates to take a choice piece of business away to be able to say they work for a General Electric, a prestige client. So there's a lot of competition in the field of communications. Who's to say whether somebody's summary of gets a communications snow job of trying to write up the Clinton Foundation? Who's to say whether the idea of saying that the new tagline for the Clinton Foundation is that Bill and Hillary will put people first, is that decision to write that sentence, is that worth $10,000? Is it worth $1 million? Is it worth $10 million? I mean, it's a very soggy field where if what you're trying to do is really curry influence with the Clintons, or with people close to the Clintons, what you could do is you could pay off a Teneo, for example, which is, I would argue, a communications firm, PR firm, masquerading as an investment firm, an investment banking firm. You can overpay Teneo to get a theory would run to get on the right side of the Clintons way back when, or the people around the Clintons. And who's going to challenge that, right? So similarly, before we get to Teneo, you had what were you talking about there, Jason?
That was that guy who's famous for drunken, stupid behavior. What's his name? Danchenko.
There was a guy called Dolan, who was a communications guy, very close to the Clintons, being on the payroll of the Russian government, who was involved. He was the one who was trying to get information from Danchenko and others damaging to Trump and put it into the Steele dossier. This guy. Now, in America, since I think 1938 or thereabouts, the Foreign Agent Registration Act is on the books, and Dolan his firm had signed contracts with various parts of the Russian government to promote the perceived interests of the Russian government in the communications way around the world. And so if anybody was working for the Russian government, it would seem to me or elements of the Russian government, it was the Clinton team, certainly not Trump. And before you mentioned Strzok, I won't take the book out, but I made the mistake of buying Strzok's book, which I can't believe got published. I mean, called Compromise, which was basically
badly written.
Well, the basic thesis of it is 100% false now. I mean, CNN is correcting their stories. Washington Post is correcting their stories. The Steele dossier was not fiction. It was garbage. It was invented garbage. And
the backwards R, so it's clever, Charles. That's a little play on Cyrillics.
Yeah. And the subtle red, white, and blue, the white cover and the blue thing and the R. But anyway, they look at this. This thing has a 5-star review.
I'm sure it's his mom or something. He's pretty clever for a dope. Let's see what the reviews say.
I think I can't see the type's awfully small, but it's.
Well, I mean, 5-star. Let's see what some of these 5-star reviewers have to say about this thing. Whoops. Very chilling details about the Russian investigation. Some new information as well.
But
I don't know.
The whole predicate for the investigation of Trump's ties to Russia is garbage. And the FBI knew it was garbage, and the Department of Justice knew it was garbage, and the mainstream media knew it was garbage, and Adam Schiff knew it was garbage. Many people who were constantly in the mainstream all knew it was garbage. People won Pulitzers for selling this garbage. Strzok got a book published and was paid for this garbage. And if you had, I love the way journalists get all hot and bothered, the mainstream journalists on television and you should be, when a journalist is censored in a country or attacked in another, suddenly, the profession of journalism is under attack. Isn't that horrible? And but really, ever since 15, since before Trump went down the escalator, the mainstream journalists have been co-conspiring with the Clintons and others to sell, and they have successfully sold in the minds of what remains of the minds of too many, this idea that Trump was a Russian agent and a reprehensible person. When we replaced the Trump family, people who were not mooching off their positions, who in fact lost money while Trump, at least Trump did, while he was president. We replaced that family with the Biden family, and your poster for today, with a guy who shouldn't be allowed to make any serious decision about anything, and his brother James Biden, who's a crook, and Hunter Biden, who's a crook. That's what we've got now. So they lionize the Biden.
Well, you forgot crackhead.
They refuse to do legitimate inquiry. They shut down legitimate inquiry into the Hunter Biden videotapes, which are disgusting, I'm told, but got us all excited about a P-tape. There's just fiction.
Right, that never surfaced. That's amazing. Within, basically, the day I heard that Hunter Biden was involved in all this, the videos were there. And I mean, irrespective of the content, it was definitely him. We heard for years, not one interview with an alleged Russian prostitute, not one hotel security video camera thing. There was just no evidence to support any of it.
Right. And then similarly, you have allegations of shady dealings. Now they're trying to say that Trump overstated the value of his hotel on a loan application and understated it for tax purposes.
Isn't that kind of standard procedure that there's a lot of different ways to value something? And
well, it's even in the accounting profession, there's what's called the book basis of accounting and the tax basis of accounting, and it's accepted that you can have very different values for book and for tax. Tax rules permit you to value things in a certain way and to write off depreciation against buildings in a more accelerated way. What's this?
Well, this is because I was looking at the Trump threat to sue the Pulitzer Prize people. This is something I've become familiar with. A demand, a non-spoliation of evidence letter from Bud Clement. I don't know if you want an attorney named Bud, but all right. Oh, no, they're sending it to Bud.
Yeah.
Right. So this office represents President Donald Trump in a letter dated October 3rd, 2021, a copy of which is annexed here too for your reference. President Trump, called your attention to the Pulitzer Prize Board's erroneous decision to award the New York Times and the Washington Post with the 2018 Pulitzer Prize for National Reporting. As highlighted in President Trump's letter, it has recently become apparent that the subject articles were based on incontrovertibly false information provided by dubious sources who were maliciously attempting to mislead the public and tarnish our client's reputation. This is pretty good because I was looking for what's going on with this threat, and the fact that they've sent this letter is better than just a threat.
Right.
Alina is a much better name for a lawyer than Bud.
Alina Habba.
Who is she?
Habba. I don't just say.
She's a senior partner at this thing.
Yeah. Never heard of this firm, but that doesn't mean it's not.
I think the problem that Trump is facing is remarkably, well, I think the problem that Trump is facing is that most lawyers don't want to take his case.
Yeah.
For fear that they'll be ostracized and cancel cultured.
Yeah. So, losing my train of thought here, Jason. We were down a track.
Well, we were talking about Danchenko. We were talking about Teneo.
Oh, no, we're talking about this this idea that we could spend 5 years or more now on this Russian collusion delusion, have it be disproven, and have that idiot Schiff still say that he was glad that he went ahead with this, and have these book reviews still be out there for Peter Strzok. And what's very sad to see here, going back to the Williams and Connolly book, the idea of a deep state. Back in 1989, when it became apparent that communist China and later in 1992 or three that India were going to walk towards a form of capitalism and away from communism, old line communism. And as the Soviet Union blew up, the United States economically and strategically was in a very, very strong position back then. We didn't have the debt that we have today. We didn't have a government system where idiots like AOC and others can assert that we need to spend $93 trillion on something. And the punditry will actually say, yeah, that sounds right. Maybe not 93, maybe 33. I mean, throwing around numbers that make no fucking sense on projects that are even dumber than that. And our allies, because of what Biden did in Afghanistan, our NATO allies certainly don't trust us, I don't think, at this moment. And they've got their own problems at home with high energy costs and refugee streams and all that. We have a China that's firing off hypersonic weapons. Recently, they flew some weapon at 5 or 6 times the speed of sound, and mid-flight, the weapon fired another weapon. And
wow.
The people, the accounts I read are that we have no idea how they did that. That seemed to break the known laws of physics. So clearly, we're not doing so well in keeping up with.
I hadn't heard that part.
Yeah,
That's not so good to admit. Oh, we have no idea how they're doing that.
right.
Wow.
So we're too busy, forcing people to admit their white privilege and probably, putting together a new marching band. So anyway, we're not in the strongest of positions right now, and China has certainly dramatically increased its power and its relevance around the world, and its potential lethality to us. And what they've been doing, we've been talking about it since really it began happening. The people, I believe these are Chinese actors, are using weaknesses that this country and other countries like ours have, occasioned by our past and the fact that slavery was legal in this country until 1865. They're using that black mark upon this nation as a way to inflame passions. They're not trying to get justice for descendants of African American slaves. They're merely just trying to foment tension and misery and use the heightened tension as an excuse to go against the perceived right-leaning power structure, and then move on the idea of the Second Amendment being protected the way I think Trump and others want to protect it. The Chinese are they're really banging that drum. And I think I would look for them to increase, to use, the recent decision, I guess, down in Georgia appears properly to have gone against the 3 white people who killed a black guy.
Aubrey.
Right. That if those 3 had been acquitted, we would have even more fuel on the fire over this Thanksgiving period. But I think the Chinese are stirring up that trouble. I don't think the Chinese have explained properly at all what happened with COVID-19. I think they are not merely rivals. I think they're going for it. They see an opportunity with the resident barely being in the White House, and with Kamala Harris she got up and she gave some speech in the last little while where she was going to tell us her genius approach on explaining inflation. And she got up there, expecting a real insightful pitch. And she said, well, the reason for inflation is that prices are rising. And this is somebody who's supposed to be, Peter Schweitzer's book on Elaine Chao's family and frankly, Jared Kushner and also Kamala Harris and some others is most unflattering to Kamala Harris. And Kirsten Gillibrand destroyed her in a debate. Go back to that history. So she's not somebody who's all that popular in her own party, but to be given the role of fixing the southern border and then say, okay, what I think I'll do is I'll go to France, to Paris for 5 days. And the latest story, I don't know if you saw it, she somehow managed to go on a shopping trip to some high-end cooking store, and spent 500 plus euros on a couple of pots, cooking pots in Paris. I mean, what were you thinking? Right? I mean, how many people in America have one $500 pot in
What
their
is it
kitchen?
made of? Gold?
I don't know. Who
It's actually
knows?
a regular pot wrapped in $480
It's
cash.
probably well. No, there are some pots. There's this Le Creuset stuff, which I don't think this was. Yeah, this Le Creuset pots. Supposedly, if you're a real expert in cooking, my
Yeah,
mother.
no, I think there is a good merit to it. But when the hell does the vice president have time to be cooking?
Right. Well, but or worse, you say, okay, we've got nations streaming into what used to be Texas, across an open border, and she's not even going to go visit that border, but instead has time to go buy some copper pots in Paris. And who goes to Paris for 5 days, unless you're on vacation,
Right.
right? I mean, I love Paris, but don't get me wrong, but it's this is just it's so tone deaf. This and Joe Biden going to spend Thanksgiving on Nantucket at a time where, most Americans are really wondering, if they're going to be able to scrape the money together for Thanksgiving. And beyond that, what's going to happen with Hanukkah and Christmas and getting gifts together in time for that stuff, and how much is everything going to cost?
There
And
was a
this,
very obnoxious press conference, I guess that's redundant to say, but from Jen Psaki, where she was yelling at Peter Doocy, who I think she must secretly be in love with. She keeps calling on him. But she said, a 20-pound turkey is only $1 more. I mean, what the hell are you talking about? First of all, who's going to eat 20 pounds of turkey and $1 more than something that's already twice as expensive as a regular person can afford? What is she saying?
well, again, you see, she lives in a world in America and around the world. There's a class of people which we can guess how many people, percentage of the country it is. It's probably 95% of the country does not have meaningful financial wealth, meaning outside of their home, they don't have after-tax money in a brokerage account or in bond portfolio or whatever. Most people are living hand to mouth, and they need their salaries, they need their pensions, and they don't really have substantial financial wealth. So for those people, inflation is a killer. If, on the other hand, you're Chelsea Clinton, who can't be bothered to work at age 32 or whatever she said, she didn't see any reason to try to make more money. And meanwhile, so this person walks in and gives you $1 million, somebody else gives you 20 million, and parents give you a $10 million apartment. I understand why you don't think you need to work. But the class of people who have wealth can actually benefit in inflation. They can own assets that will go up in value because of inflation. And after the cost of, the increase in inflation, those assets can be worth dramatically more. So she, I think, is in that second class of people who has access to wealth either directly or indirectly through her parents. And she grew up in Greenwich.
She's a second-class citizen. She's in that second class.
Right. Yeah. So
She's
she's
just
just
so grating to watch. I might rather be punched in the face than listen to her talk.
well. I tweeted out, who is more arrogant and ignorant, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and I forget who the third person I put on the list, but it's these are arrogant, ignorant people.
Yeah, that's a
You know,
tough race. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki,
yeah,
all dumb.
incredibly dumb.
Yeah. Now, so what else did you want to
Here we
discuss,
go.
Charles?
There's the tweet right there. You almost have it. Who is more arrogant and ignorant?
Yes,
Joe Biden. Oh yeah,
Buttigieg.
Buttigieg and Kamala Harris. It's really difficult to say.
Let's see what people voted on that. You could make it a poll.
Maybe we should do that.
That's the corrupt order. All of the above. I would encourage Twitter users to put a profile picture there. I've noticed that ghost accounts are sort of suspicious, in my opinion. Did we want to talk about Teneo?
Well, we could talk about Teneo. I mean, it's interesting that Teneo, I think, got a series of outside investors at marked up values to the original cost of the stock and the thing. And so on paper, Doug Band, who was one of the co-founders, would have seen either a large realized or unrealized gain. And he's very much at the center of the time frame where Bill migrated from being a pauper to being somebody who's quite wealthy. And so he was in the room, flying with him around the world in private planes and a lot of different deals. For example, he was in Oslo in, I think, November of 2003 with Bill and Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein. He was in, I think, Africa maybe as well. This is before Teneo came together. And
wow,
then
is this their offices?
Yeah. And then Teneo came. Yeah, Teneo came together after, I think, 2009. And today, I mean, even Amy Chosick, who is not liked, I don't think, by the Clintons, but was on the 2008 campaign, I think, trail with the Clintons, with Hillary, and on 2000. Oh, Paul Ryan's a senior advisor to Teneo? Give me a fucking break.
I thought you'd find that interesting.
You know, amazing. Chris Dodd.
Yeah.
Ted Kennedy's still dead, so you couldn't put him on there. Lord Haig of Richmond, General George Mitchell. There are allegations against him that are not so good. Ginny Rometty was the CEO of IBM. You know, this is an old playbook. A number of different firms try this approach, but really the question is, what has Teneo actually done on these transactions that they say they're involved with? Are they providing the traditional type of merger and acquisition advisory advice that I used to do? Or are they doing Nancy Heinrich? Now that's
what about Van Jones?
Oh, Van Jones, there's another stellar choice. Harvey Pitt bounced out of the SEC. This is and Speaker Paul Ryan really, I mean, is a disgraceful human being.
Yeah.
So what this firm has done, and Band writes about it in his memo, the infamous Band memo that you can find on WikiLeaks Podesta. Basically, Teneo was, I think, used as a vehicle for people who wanted favors from the Clintons to, they pay Teneo and Bill Clinton gets what you need done. And that is a very, if Bill Clinton were a private citizen and his wife had not been Secretary of State and a presidential candidate and senator, maybe you could say that that's the way business is done. But the second Hillary's, the leading contender to be president of the United States in 16 and still wasting our time and our money, pretending that she might be relevant again in politics, you can't have a firm like Teneo around, I think, and say that you're clean.
Charles, it's interesting. As I'm looking at this article right now, it causes me to think, when Julian Assange was talking about releasing this, he went on that Dutch news program and everything, and he said he has evidence and information that will end Hillary's campaign or put her in jail or whatever. I think he said put her in jail. That's got to be very disappointing, distressing to be Julian Assange. He's released the big dump here and he's sitting in jail and nothing has happened to Hillary Clinton.
Well, worse, he's not just any old jail. I mean, he's not just any old jail. It's a harsh jail, I believe, in the UK. And that's in part because the New World Order, the central architects of the New World Order envisaged a primary role for the UK working in league with the US. So I believe the UK intelligence services and people who are out of that now, in quotes, retirees, Boris Johnson, who was foreign minister of the UK in 16. I think there are a lot of people in the UK who stand potentially exposed here if the truth comes out, when the truth comes out about the Clinton Foundation. So going back to the Michelle Obama thing, one threat to this project would be if they put Michelle in, if they somehow engineer a way of arguing that Durham has had enough time and then he's got to wrap up his investigation within a short period of time, while at the same time folks in the Justice Department saying, you guys investigate, but we're not going to prosecute. We
Right.
decided
That's the big.
So I'm not saying there isn't exposure to that, because there is, but on the other hand, Durham has only spent 2 years on this, and when you hear people talking in the press who are experienced prosecuting, and you watch how slowly the wheels of government turn, and then you consider that this is a project that would expose not just the Clintons, but the Bushes, McCain, Biden, a whole bunch of different people, all are at risk for, not to mention the Obama Foundation, for running charities badly. And then the long list of billionaires who have their foundations that may have been used to pay off politicians, either subtly or indirectly, or maybe quite directly. This is an area that a lot of powerful people don't want to see fully exposed.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's quite clear. Well, Charles, I think we've covered quite a bit today. We may be approaching the end of today's episode. I do like to remind people, because, there's all kinds of difficulties with YouTube, and they're trying to block and ban things. People can watch simulcasts of all of the shows you and I do, Closing In and Sunday with Charles, on rumble.com/user/CS The Truth. We've also got Odyssey.com, which is a great way for people to keep up with the show. I've realized that because Odyssey.com was keeping archives of some of the old YouTube channels before they got destroyed, in many ways it's the best option, or one of the best options, for people who want to go back and look at some of the older shows. If you're searching for an old episode that's been removed from YouTube, there's quite a library here on Odyssey.com/@Crowdsource The Truth. You can also just go on Odyssey and search for Crowdsource The Truth. We've got live streaming on there, so people can watch live streams of the ongoing shows. And of course, people can support Crowdsource The Truth by going to subscribestar.com/Crowdsource The Truth, or patreon.com/Crowdsource The Truth, and becoming a sponsor. I'm going to be back later tonight with another episode of High Dive with Lee Stranahan. We're going to be looking at this Ahmaud Arbery trial. I tend to agree. It seems like it was the right decision. I think Lee might have some other insights. So people enjoy the controversy there, and we'll be back for that at 8:30. Anything else you'd like to say before we go, Charles?
Just happy Thanksgiving.
Exactly. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Charles. And I'll see everybody later tonight. Thanks for watching.